Revenge with Karen.
Why the hell is my face in a diaper ad? That's the first line of the voicemail. No greeting, no pleasantries. Just a furious ex-customer, voice cracking, because somehow her testimonial about baby wipes ended up in a national commercial campaign, and she swears she never approved it. Kimberly hits pause and plays it again, slower this time. The words don't change. The tone still drips with litigious rage. Sitting at her desk in the corner of Vira Technologies' sixth-floor compliance suite, a windowless back office that smells like toner and quiet resignation. 14 years she's been here. 14. And she knows exactly what this means. She exhales through her nose and mutters, well, here we go again. See, Kimberly doesn't do drama. She's not one of those performative fire drill types you find pacing hallways pretending every hiccup is a crisis. Her power is colder, quieter, bureaucratic judo. She was promoted to head of compliance operations not because she's flashy or charming, but because she reads the fine print that makes other people's eyes cross. She survived 5 CMOs, the kind of men who show up with buzzwords, burn bridges with middle management, and bounce to a new gig before the charred deck chairs are even cool. They come in preaching innovation. They leave under investigation. Kimberly just updates her inbox filters and keeps documenting. She doesn't get invited to the strategy offsites in Aspen, but her initials are on every single campaign approval log. She's not the show pony. She's the tripwire. If something goes wrong and her initials are missing, legal knows where the blood trail starts. So when the new campaign, Project Lighthouse, lands in her review queue with 3 blinking yellow flags and 1 full-blown "Are you insane?" red marker, she doesn't panic. She does what she always does. Opens the digital folder, reviews the briefing slides, and starts the checklist. Testimonial consents, international data handling language, opt-in mechanics, the usual suspects. Except this time, there's no signed usage agreement for any of the consumer footage. There's placeholder language like approval pending and assumed consent based on previous engagement. Kimberly feels her jaw tighten. Assumed consent. That phrase is a landmine soaked in gasoline. And if you're thinking, damn, this is starting to sound like the kind of corporate grenade that blows someone's bonus off, well, yeah, that's about right. And since over 93% of folks who listen to stories like this don't hit subscribe, I'll ask just once, if you're digging this ride into corporate absurdity, go ahead and like and subscribe. Seriously, fuels our team more than coffee and passive-aggressive email threads combined. Back in the trenches, Kimberly keeps scrolling. There's a name she doesn't recognize, Blake Henderson. Title, Chief Marketing Officer. Newly added to the approval flow. She frowns. CMOs don't usually touch back-end forms. She clicks his note. It's a recorded voice memo. Let's stop overthinking and just launch this. Lighthouse needs to go live by Friday. Greenlight it, compliance. Tone is smug, confident, Silicon Valley energy without the brains to back it. Kimberly closes the memo and opens his LinkedIn profile. Of course, he's new, like 3 weeks new. Came from some D2C mattress brand that went bankrupt during Q3. Perfect. She types a note. Project Lighthouse lacks verified consumer usage consent and contains misaligned data routing for international targets. Not recommended for launch. Attaches the flagged documents, her summary, and a screenshot of the usage gaps. Then, habitually, she CCs herself at her personal encrypted email. Not because she doesn't trust the system, but because she's seen systems break under pressure, and she's seen CMOs delete trails faster than toddlers deny cookie theft. When her assistant pops her head in later and says, "You think he's gonna push it anyway?" Kimberly shrugs. They always do. 'Cause here's the thing about compliance. It's invisible when it works. Nobody claps when you stop a disaster. They only scream when you fail to. And this time, Kimberly smells smoke already. Blake Henderson walked into the Monday marketing review like he was late for his own TED talk. Swagger turned up to 11, button-down shirt unbuttoned just enough to make HR uncomfortable. Holding a $7 coffee like it was an Oscar. Introduced himself with the kind of polished self-importance that only came from burning through investor cash and still failing upward. Hi everyone, I'm Blake. I believe in velocity over bureaucracy and making big bets. We're gonna shake things up. Kimberly didn't flinch. She'd seen this play before, different actors, same script. They show up with slogans, demand dashboards in Comic Sans, and assume anyone who reads a contract must be afraid of success. Job wasn't to worship disruption. It was to quietly mop up the blood when it went sideways. She watched him breeze through the Lighthouse campaign pitch like a man auditioning for Shark Tank. This is the future of user-driven brand architecture, he beamed. We've got real voices, real impact, real reach. Lighthouse is how we own the consumer journey. Kimberly raised her hand, already regretting it. Blake, I've reviewed the testimonial assets, and there are some significant gaps in the usage rights. Also, the form language around EU data handling. He cut her off with a chuckle. Stop, overthinking it. The room went still. Not because anyone cared about compliance, but because nobody interrupted Kimberly. Ever. Blake leaned back in his chair, cocky as hell, and added, look, I get that you folks have a way of doing things, but this campaign's got momentum. Legal nuance is a luxury when you're chasing relevance. We need this out Friday. Lighthouse is going live, she blinked. Once. It's a directive, he continued, scribbling something on his iPad with a flourish. There, documented. He even held it up like show and tell for sociopaths. Kimberly closed her notebook slowly. She didn't speak. Didn't argue. She had learned that men like Blake didn't respond to logic, they responded to leverage. Leverage was something you collected, not brandished. After the meeting, she walked back to her desk without a word. Opened the Lighthouse project folder. Attached her original risk review. Wrote a single, sterile email. Per today's meeting, launching Project Lighthouse under expedited directive. Please see attached for documented concerns regarding testimonial consent, international data handling, and opt-in verification. This launch proceeds against formal compliance recommendations. She CC'd the General Counsel. BCC'd herself at home. Then, almost as an afterthought, she took a screenshot of Blake's directive and dropped it into her offline archive labeled Sisyphus, CMO edition. Her assistant peeked in. So, we're launching, Kimberly said flatly. But I want every workflow, every email, every asset stored locally. If it sneezes, I want to hear the tissue crinkle. Blake, meanwhile, was already posting a selfie with the campaign team. Caption, when marketing leads, the market follows. Lighthouse incoming. Light rocket hash velocity wins, of course. Kimberly muted him. By Wednesday, the creative assets were rolling into media buys. Someone in brand ops forgot to strip geolocation metadata off the testimonial video files. Someone else used a customer's full name in a tag. And Kimberly just kept documenting, like she always had. There was a reason she survived 5 CMOs. It wasn't luck. It was receipts. Friday morning, the building smelled like cheap celebration. Someone in marketing had catered muffins shaped like light bulbs. There were paper banners with phrases like illuminate the future and beacon mode, on, taped up around the lobby like a corporate baby shower gone off its meds. Product manager had even wheeled in a fake lighthouse prop from Party City and plopped it by the espresso machine. Kimberly walked past it all without slowing her pace. She'd seen the same parade of premature confetti 5 times before. Project Lighthouse went live at 9:00 a.m. Eastern. By 9:03, Blake had posted a video to LinkedIn standing in front of a giant wall monitor, arms crossed like he was the second coming of Don Draper. Post read, after weeks of pushing boundaries, Project Lighthouse is live. Thank you to the dream team who made it happen. Compliance included winking face. Let's make some noise. Kimberly stared at that winking emoji for a full 5 seconds before clicking mute on his profile again. At the all-hands meeting, applause rippled through the floor like someone had solved climate change instead of uploading a few flashy banner ads with shaky legal footing. Campaign metrics dashboard lit up in real time. Impressions, shares, click-throughs. In the room, people were high-fiving like this was a moon landing. Kimberly stood in the back, next to the off-brand La Croix fridge, arms folded, mentally cataloging the data flags she already saw flapping in the breeze. She returned to her office and checked the system logs. 3 help desk tickets already, buried under vague subject lines. My testimonial? Didn't approve. Is my video on your website? Who gave you permission to use my kid? She clicked into the back-end dashboard and noticed something else. The opt-in triggers were firing inconsistently. A glitch in the form logic meant that some users who declined data usage were still being piped into the remarketing stream. That was not just a bug. That was exposure. Legal, reputational, regulatory. She logged everything. Every complaint. Every trigger misfire. Every name. Opened a new internal tracker and titled it Lighthouse Fallout Phase 1. Color-coded, time-stamped, version-controlled. She'd built it in a private directory under her risk mirror, offline, encrypted with dual verification access. She'd learned the hard way. When things break, the first thing people do is try to change the narrative. Her assistant popped her head in. Hey, some of these complaints sound serious. Should we pause the rollout? Kimberly didn't look up from her screen. No, really? She turned to face her. He signed the directive. He pushed it through. He overruled protocol. This is his campaign. We don't stop it. So what do? We document. By Monday, the brand team was doing spin control on social. That's when the screenshots started popping up on Reddit. One thread titled "Anyone Else Creeped Out by the New Viora Campaign" had 1.7K upvotes by lunch. Digital ethics blogger tweeted a side-by-side of Lighthouse's homepage and GDPR compliance guidelines with the caption, "This might be illegal. Just saying." Internally, the mood shifted. The celebration muffins went stale. Nobody refilled the fake Lighthouse's battery. Kimberly's inbox bloomed with vague check-ins from legal. Can you clarify what the approval flow looked like for Lighthouse? And do you recall any red flags noted during pre-launch review? She replied with one-liners and attachments. No opinions, no feelings, just the facts. Her team followed her lead, document, timestamp, verify. It was standard operating procedure now. Blake had made the decisions. Kimberly was just maintaining the records. The buzz was dying, and the dread, that was just beginning to hum. The first envelope came in a dull beige, the kind you only see in nightmares and government mail. Kimberly opened it with the calm of a surgeon prepping for a postmortem. Inside, a formal inquiry from the Office of the Illinois Attorney General. Allegations of consumer data misuse under the Personal Information Protection Act. The words were crisp, clinical, absolutely unambiguous. 48 hours later, a second envelope arrived, this one from Washington State. Same allegations, different jurisdiction. By week's end, 3 more trickled in. Then, on Friday morning, class action notice landed on her desk like a guillotine. Her assistant brought it in wordlessly, like it was radioactive. I thought you should see this before the others do, she whispered, setting it down as if it might explode. Kimberly didn't answer right away. She stared at the envelope, unfolded the letter. Scanned, plaintiffs, damages, alleged violations. Estimated reach of affected parties, over 1.2 million individuals. She exhaled and said, without looking up, start backing up everything. Internal logs, emails, version control mirror it on the disaster drive. No cloud. The emergency meetings started within the hour. Legal, PR, risk, ops. Everyone packed into that miserable second-floor conference room with the flickering overhead bulb and the smell of burnt coffee always clinging to the corners. Blake strolled in 10 minutes late, phone still in hand, like none of it mattered, flopped into the chair next to the chief counsel and yawned. Let's all just take a breath, he said, like they were talking about a typo in a brochure. These kinds of flare-ups happen all the time in bold marketing. We've got legal budget. We've got PR. We'll issue a clarification and move on. Clarification. That word rolled off his tongue like it was a magic spell. The general counsel stared at him with the expression of a man being held hostage by optimism. This is not a clarification moment. This is a formal investigation by multiple states and now a civil action. There's serious exposure here. Blake waved a hand. It's overblown, we're in the spotlight, it means it's working. Kimberly didn't speak. She simply slid a thin manila folder across the table. No drama, no explanation. The GC opened it. Inside was her original email, dated 6 weeks prior, with attached compliance warnings. Page 2, her notes on testimonial consent issues. Page 3, the directive memo signed and timestamped. Page 4, a screenshot of the final approval form with Blake's name listed as accountable executive. The GC gave a low whistle. Blake glanced at the folder, unimpressed. Yeah, I know what I signed. You all were moving too slow. I had to cut through the red tape. Kimberly finally spoke, voice flat as winter asphalt. You didn't just cut through red tape. Activated the expedited authority clause. The room paused. Blake blinked. What clause? Kimberly leaned back in her chair. In the internal project charter, Clause 4C, expedited executive launch authority. It's a carryover from the old product emergency protocols, rarely used, but it includes a liability offset rider. He laughed. Okay, English, please. The general counsel looked at Kimberly. She nodded once. The GC turned to Blake and said, slowly, it means when you force an early launch over documented compliance objections using that clause, the financial liability shifts to you personally. The silence that followed was not stunned. It was surgical. Blake looked around the room, waited for someone to say just kidding. No one did. I didn't see that part, he said finally. Kimberly turned her laptop around and showed the charter, highlighted, Clause 4C. Then she pointed to the metadata. Signed it, you initialed the addendum. You acknowledged it in the approval system, and you timestamped it. I thought that was just boilerplate, Blake muttered. Kimberly didn't smile, didn't blink. Just said it always is, until it isn't. That afternoon, she updated the risk log, labeled the class action folder, backed up the entire Lighthouse directory onto a physical drive, and dropped it in the fireproof safe behind the HR archives. Blake, meanwhile, posted another video to LinkedIn. This one didn't get much engagement. Kimberly stayed late that night, not out of obligation, out of instinct. The kind of sixth sense you earn after watching 5 CMOs blow themselves up with their own bravado. The building was quiet, just the hum of the vending machine and the occasional echo from a cleaning crew carting their mop buckets past darkened cubicles. She sat alone in the compliance archive room, space no one visited unless they were trying to bury something or unearth it. The Lighthouse Project charter was open on her second monitor. Not the version that was uploaded to the project portal, the original. The one from 4 months ago, before Blake, before everything. She had to dig through 6 layers of archived drafts to find it. And there it was, hiding in plain sight, Clause 4C, Expedited Executive Launch Authority. It was old, legacy language from a time when the company had been scrambling to launch hardware updates in time for holiday shipping windows. Back then, executives had insisted on a clause that let them override standard review protocols in emergencies. It was boilerplate, forgotten, dormant, until Blake, in all his posturing and LinkedIn wisdom, decided to invoke it like it was a badge of honor. Kimberly pulled the metadata. Clause had been flagged in yellow by the legal assistant during draft review. She herself had written a comment on it. Recommends suppressing for digital campaigns. Risk profile has changed. The comment was dismissed by Blake. She had logged that too, and then she found the final submission file. His signature. His initials next to the expedited authority checkmark. The digital signature, time-stamped exactly 4 hours after her compliance hold recommendation, didn't just bulldoze the process. He picked up the liability with both hands and signed for it. She didn't react, didn't laugh or curse or fist pump. That wasn't her style. Kimberly's victories never arrived in explosions. They simmered. They unfolded like lawsuits, slow, deliberate, lethal. She printed the full document. 3 crisp copies. No annotations, no underlines. Just the clean, damning truth. She slid one into her personal file labeled High-Risk Override, Lighthouse, and placed the file in the secure cabinet with the double key lock. The second copy went into her backup envelope, the one in her home office safe. The third, she folded it in half, sealed it in an interoffice envelope, and walked it directly to the general counsel's office. No email, no digital trail. Just a note clipped to the front. This might be relevant soon. She placed it on his chair, locked the door behind her, and went home. The next morning, the GC knocked lightly on her open door. Kimberly didn't look up from her laptop, just tilted her head slightly to acknowledge him. He set a black coffee down next to her keyboard. No lid, no words, then walked out. That was enough. By now, the executive floor was buzzing with lawyers, consultants, and spin doctors. Blake had stopped holding meetings and started issuing edicts, most of them contradictory. First, he told marketing to pause all retargeting ads. Then he told them to double down on awareness. Then he tried to blame the CRM team for bad opt-in logic. Then the design team for confusing form language. At one point, he even asked if they could claim Lighthouse was just a beta test. Kimberly watched it unfold from her perch in the compliance suite, the way a scientist might watch bacteria grow in a petri dish. Documented everything, archived version histories, labeled every conversation folder with names, dates, and exact phrasing. She had built an invisible fortress of receipts, and Blake was walking into it blindfolded, smiling. By Thursday, she got a ping from the GC. Just a single line, need you in the boardroom Friday. Bring the originals, no exclamation points, no context. She replied with a thumbs up. Back in her archive room, she opened the secure cabinet and retrieved the file. Ran her fingers over the label. Then added one more page to the back. A printout of Blake's internal Slack message from the day of launch. We're not stopping for legal. If it blows up, we'll handle it. That's what budget is for. She didn't need to say a word. The documents would speak for themselves. It hit on a Tuesday. The number came in like a punch to the solar plexus: $5 million. Official civil penalty issued by the New York Attorney General's office, citing unauthorized data usage, deceptive marketing practices, and violation of digital privacy statutes. The fine itself was bad enough, but it was the phrasing that really gutted the leadership team, particularly the phrase willful disregard of compliance warnings. That's when the press got wind of it. Within 12 hours, 5 outlets had run with the headline Vira Technologies fined $5M for consumer data violations in Lighthouse campaign. By dinner, it was on the front page of TechBeat. By breakfast, it had made morning market briefing on CNBC, nestled right between an oil spill and a pharmaceutical bribery scandal. Stock dipped 6 points by noon. That's when the CEO called the emergency board meeting. No agenda. No time to prep. Just one sentence in the invite: we need clarity. Today, Kimberly arrived early. She wore gray. The same blazer she wore during the SEC audit of 2017, the one where she'd buried a VP's ego under a spreadsheet. She carried nothing but her laptop and a single USB drive clipped to her key ring. No entourage, no drama, just data. The boardroom was tense. Leather chairs pulled tight, bottled water untouched. Blake sat near the far end, suit rumpled, phone face down for once. The general counsel sat directly across from him, unreadable. The CEO stood by the whiteboard, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. "We're not here to play blame games," the CEO said flatly. "We're here to understand what happened and what exposure remains." Blake cleared his throat and jumped in first. "Look, I think we can all agree that this was a breakdown in cross-functional execution. There were legacy systems in play. CRM handoffs weren't standardized. The opt-in schema was outdated, probably a holdover from the 2019 compliance model. Honestly, it's amazing this hasn't happened before." A few heads nodded, others narrowed their eyes. The GC didn't move. Kimberly didn't interrupt. She waited, patient. Let him hang his words like damp laundry. When the CEO turned to her and said, "Kimberly, your view?" she simply plugged in her USB. The screen behind her flickered to life. Her presentation had no animations, no buzzwords, just a title slide: Lighthouse Approval and Risk History Timeline Review. Slide 1, Launch Directive issued by Blake, time-stamped and signed. Slide 2, her original compliance objection, logged and circulated 3 weeks before launch. Slide 3, internal emails from marketing requesting legal clarification, marked as overridden by CMO. Slide 4, screenshot of the approval form with Clause 4C, expedited launch authority, activated and signed. Slide 5, regulatory flags logged post-launch, matched against consumer complaints. Slide 6, timeline of interdepartmental awareness versus executive overrides. Slide 7, press coverage trajectory plotted against internal response lags. Final slide, side-by-side image of Blake's written directive: just launch it. It's a directive, and his signed liability waiver under Clause 4C. She turned to face the room, voice steady. "That's all. Happy to take questions." You could hear the air conditioner hum. The silence wasn't awkward. It was absolute. One board member stared at the slide so long he forgot to blink. Another just rubbed the bridge of his nose like he was preparing for a migraine. The CEO said nothing. He didn't look at Blake. He didn't look at Kimberly. Just kept staring at that final slide, letting the weight of it settle into the carpet, into the oak table, into every decision they hadn't made until it was too late. Blake broke first. This is being taken out of context. That clause wasn't meant for this." "I mean, nobody told me it would transfer liability." The GC finally looked up. "You were told, you were shown, and you signed." Blake's mouth opened, then closed. Kimberly didn't flinch. He didn't gloat, just saved the deck and disconnected the drive. The CEO took a slow breath and said, "We'll take it from here." She stood, nodded once, walked out without looking back. The only sound in the room was the quiet click of the boardroom door closing behind her. In the hallway, she passed a marketing director sitting on the floor, head in hands. Downstairs, someone was crying in the stairwell. She kept walking. The building felt colder than usual, like it finally understood what was coming. Blake's PR tour started before the ink on the fine had dried. Leaked memos framed him as a bold innovator misunderstood by internal blockers. An anonymous quote, almost certainly from himself, showed up in a niche industry blog. Sometimes, pushing boundaries means breaking old habits. Unfortunately, not everyone understands that. Kimberly didn't respond. She didn't have to. The documents were already doing the talking. HR had started quietly requesting system access logs. A forensic audit of the project folder was underway. Someone in finance pinged her team asking for Blake's bonus structure and whether any clauses referenced willful negligence. She replied with a zipped file titled CMO Compensation, Writer Lighthouse, Addendum PDF, and left it at that. By Thursday, legal had issued a hold on all stock option disbursements tied to campaign KPIs. Whisper Network got loud. Blake's name was floated in Slack with new euphemisms: Directive Dan, Captain Claus, Liability Jesus. He tried to confront her once, in the hallway outside the 6th floor compliance suite. "You knew what that clause meant," he said, voice tight, just loud enough to be heard by 3 interns pretending to refill the printer. Kimberly looked at him, eyes calm. "Yes, that's why I flagged it in writing. You should have told me it was that serious." "I did. 3 times, in writing. You didn't explain the implications clearly. You signed a waiver written in 12-point Arial with a summary line in bold." His nostrils flared. "You wanted this to happen." She stepped closer. "No, Blake, I just prepared for it." He didn't speak after that. Later that day, she received a calendar invite from the CEO's chief of staff. Subject line: Risk Governance Architecture, Drafting Session. Location: Executive Strategy Suite. Only 2 invitees, Kimberly and the CEO. In the board meeting the next morning, one of the more senior members, an old banking vet with eyes like a hawk and hands that never stopped tapping a Montblanc, asked the question directly. "Miss Hall, would you consider designing and leading a new risk oversight division?" Reporting directly to the board, she didn't blink. "I'd consider reviewing a proposal," she said. No smile, no gloating, just precision. Afterward, in the elevator, General Counsel leaned in and whispered, "You could name your price right now." She simply replied, "I'm still documenting." That weekend, she drove out to her parents' place in the suburbs. Her mom had made a roast. Her dad had football on mute. At one point during dinner, between bites of mashed potatoes and some story about a neighbor's dog stealing Amazon packages, her dad looked over and asked, "How's work going, kiddo?" She paused, wiped her mouth, took a sip of water. Then she smiled just barely and said, "Busy," and that was all. Because Kimberly knew the story wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The next directive was coming. But this time, it would be hers. The door to the boardroom closed with a soft click, the kind that always seemed louder in the moments that mattered. No assistants, no advisors. Just the CEO, the board, the general counsel, and Blake, his tie a little too tight, his confidence finally starting to look like desperation wearing cologne. No projector, no slide deck, no muffins or coffee. Just a leather folder at the center of the table with a single name embossed on the cover, Blake Henderson. The CEO stood at the head of the table, calm as lake water before a storm. His voice was even. "This isn't about the campaign anymore. This is about governance, judgment, integrity." Blake leaned forward, trying to mask the tremor in his hands with a smirk. "Look, if this is about that clause again, I already explained." The CEO cut in, not with volume, but with gravity. "Is this why you signed the personal liability waiver?" Silence. The kind that empties a room without anyone moving. The general counsel slid the leather folder across the table to Blake, slow and deliberate. Blake opened it. Inside, his directive memo, annotated, digital signature on the expedited launch form. The version history from the project charter with his edits highlighted in blue. An internal email where he overrode a risk flag with a note: "Stop blocking velocity. Launching per my authority." And finally, his Slack message, printed in bold: "If it blows up, we'll handle it. That's what budget is for." Blake flipped the pages with increasing speed, as if hoping they'd rearrange themselves into a different story. They didn't. His face drained of color. I mean, no one said this would be enforceable." That clause wasn't explained. The general counsel spoke deadpan. "You initialed next to the explanation. Twice." The banking vet on the board didn't even look up as he muttered, "This is negligence wrapped in arrogance." Another board member, usually quiet, finally spoke. He tried to shift the blame to compliance. "After all this," the CEO didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Built protocols to prevent exposure. You dismantled them. Kimberly flagged the risks. You ignored her. Legal reviewed the waiver. You activated it. You were not misled. You were impatient." Blake opened his mouth. The CEO raised a hand. "I don't want excuses, Blake. I want your resignation. By end of day." The words weren't angry, they were final, and that made them lethal. Blake sat frozen for a moment, then nodded almost imperceptibly. As the board moved on to next agenda items, pending litigation status, stock impact assessments, interim marketing leadership. Blake sat in silence, still holding the folder like it might disappear if he gripped it hard enough. Outside the room, Kimberly sat in her office when the calendar invite popped up. Subject: EVP Risk Strategy, Promotion Discussion Time, 10:00 a.m. Monday location. Executive Suite. She read it once. Then again, let it sit on her screen for a full minute before finally clicking accept. Down the hall, she could hear a door open and footsteps retreating. One set, heavy, slow, defeated, Blake's. The narrative had rewritten itself, and this time Kimberly held the pen. The email went out on a Wednesday morning. Just 6 words, buried in a longer internal memo under the headline Leadership Updates. Blake Henderson has resigned, effective immediately. No fanfare. No tribute. No farewell party with branded cupcakes and forced applause in the break room. Just a quiet vanishing. His office door stayed closed all day. The next morning, the nameplate was gone. By Friday, Facilities was hauling out his standing desk and erasing his badge from the system. Official word from the company framed it as a strategic leadership transition in response to evolving operational priorities. An official word spread faster than the stock alert. Blake had been handed a severance package, so lean it didn't even include his pending Q4 bonus. His equity grants, forfeited under the cause clause. His performance stock options, nullified under the regulatory breach provision. He tried to push back, of course, had a lawyer fire off a letter with words like ambiguous scope and disproportionate penalty. Viora's response was a single manila envelope containing a USB drive and a neatly tabbed copy of every decision, warning, and signature he'd left behind. There was nothing left to argue. By the following week, a listing for his $1.7M Craftsman home in Ashford Oaks appeared on Zillow with the description motivated seller career relocation. The realtors didn't know the half of it. And the industry, it noticed. Few gossip sites ran blurbs under euphemistic headlines like high-profile CMO exits after bold campaign misstep. But in the back channels, email threads, Slack groups, closed LinkedIn DMs, people were more direct. Blake had become a cautionary tale, a walking case study. Marketing execs started quietly checking their own approval protocols. One CMO even reached out to Kimberly's office and asked if she'd be open to informal consulting. He didn't respond, not yet. The next leadership sync was held in the main conference room, the one with the glass walls and the long walnut table where people used to ignore her notes and talk over her timelines. This time, Kimberly was seated 3 chairs from the CEO, not because she asked to be, because the new organizational chart placed her there. Risk strategy. No one interrupted her when she spoke. No one questioned her when she outlined the postmortem process. No one smirked when she said, "Data governance isn't just a policy, it's a shield. We can't treat it like duct tape." She clicked through a short deck. Clean, brutal, full of bullet points that read like scars. 1.2M impacted users, 5 AG inquiries, 1 class action, $5M fine, 1 executive departure. Then she closed the laptop. The CEO leaned back in his chair. "Anything else before we wrap?" Kimberly looked down the table. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just said, "Next item on the agenda," and the meeting moved on. Later that evening, she walked to her car alone. The sun was low. The parking lot was quiet. She unlocked the door, slid into the driver's seat, and stared at the dashboard for a long minute. No music, no distractions, just stillness. She thought back to all the times she'd been called paranoid, difficult, a blocker, all the times someone told her to stop overthinking. And then, almost to herself, she whispered the truth aloud. "I wasn't overthinking. I was just documenting." Then she drove home. No fanfare, just power. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.